Hi, it's Mark Bossert from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here today with Paul Toffoli, and we're going to be answering some common Vancouver real estate questions. And today's question is, what are authorized and unauthorized suites? How you doing today, Paul?
I'm well, Mark, yourself?
I'm good, really good. So, what are unauthorized and authorized suites, and what's the difference?
Sure. So why don't I'll back up a little bit and I'll just generally talk about, um, housing in Vancouver, as we talked about the last time, is expensive. And many families who live in single family homes or in condos try to find ways to subsidize those costs. So that could be everything from someone who has a student living with them in a room and provides them meals and gets some money, or someone like myself who has a suite in their home that they rent out on a monthly basis, whether it's furnished or unfurnished, and it's a good way to recoup some of that investment. Um, so then the next question that you alluded to is, okay, we hear a lot of talk about an unauthorized suite versus an authorized suite. What's the difference? And it really comes down to bylaws and zoning and bylaws in different, and of course, each municipality will have its own tweaks. The city of Vancouver will be slightly different than city of Burnaby or Richmond, etc. But I can do some generalizations, and then I can maybe talk a bit specifically about Vancouver, which is the one I know best. But generally, in the Lower Mainland, municipal governments have been encouraging of secondary suites in housing because um, housing is expensive, and we need to find ways to house people, whether it's students or people on lower incomes, or people on higher incomes who aren't ready to buy a property. Uh, there's a shortage of rental properties, and suites are one way of doing it. So in the city of Vancouver specifically, which is the one I know best, RS1 zoning is one of the main single-family zoning types, and that will allow a primary residence with a secondary suite, which would typically be a basement suite. And in the last couple of years, they've also allowed people to build a coach home or a carriage house that would have rental accommodation in it as well. Often when people are looking at buying properties, unless it's a brand new property, it often won't have a coach house in it. So we'll just talk about basement suites at the moment. Um, People will go into a basement suite and say, well, how can I tell if this is authorized or unauthorized? In order to be authorized, the work to convert it to a suite has to have been done with permits from the city, so building permits like you would do for any other reno, and there's certain regulations that those permits require, and those are really aimed at safety and health. So some of the ones that I'm aware of, the minimum height on an exit route, so going through the doors, so if in the middle of the night there's a fire, somebody jumps out of bed and they have to get out, the minimum height is 6'6", going through the lowest points on the way out. Um, there has to be interconnected smoke detectors between the upstairs and the basement suite. There needs to be fire separation between the upstairs and the downstairs. So there's lots of different things that go into making it something that's legal. But the main thing is that the work has to have been done with permits, and it has to be on record at the city. If it was not done with permits, or it's not on record at the city, then it's not authorized. What are the repercussions of that if it's not an unauthorized suite? That's the big question. Uh, First of all, if you have those physical things, if you have the right heights downstairs and you can take it through the process to make it authorized, it may be well worth your time and energy to do that because it takes any risk away. And what's the risk? The risk is that you get a complaint from a dissatisfied tenant, or you get a complaint from a neighbor because there's too many cars parked in front of the house, or there's noise, or whatever the reason, and the city comes in and says, guess what? You can't rent this out. It's not authorized. And then all of a sudden, that revenue source is gone. And if you counted on that money to help you pay your mortgage, guess what? All of a sudden, things get a lot less comfortable. In addition, there's costs to doing those changes, to getting the permits and making sure that everything's done to code and done properly. There's costs. Now, it's a lot less onerous now to put in a secondary suite than it used to be. It used to be that you would have to sprinkler the whole house, which was to be very expensive. Now you don't have to do that as long as you meet some of those other rules and regulations. Does that sort of answer it in a nutshell?
Absolutely. So then I guess that's the general sort of picture across, probably with some sub changes in Burnaby, Richmond, etc. But how would you actually find out what those rules are in those other municipalities? How do I check it?
Sure, that's great. So the easiest thing to do is all the municipalities have websites. So first of all, talk to your realtor who's familiar with the areas. I'm going to have that information usually at my fingertips in terms of being able to tell you. But also, you can do it yourself, or you can talk to me. Go onto the City of Vancouver website, go onto the City of Richmond website, go onto the District of North Van, City of North Van websites. They have all of their bylaws, zoning bylaws, that state whether suites are allowed, and then you can dig deeper into those zoning bylaws and find out what's required to make a suite legal. It's not rocket science. The cities are very open about it. They want people to know the rules. They want people to get informed. But I would say as a buyer, probably one of the first things to do would talk to a realtor, talk to myself, talk to somebody who's familiar with those neighborhoods, who's familiar with those bylaws, and get the information so that when you're walking into homes, you understand, okay, this one's authorized, that's great, I don't have to worry about it anymore, or this one's unauthorized, could it be made authorized if I had to or if I wanted to, and also there can be insurance questions around that. You need to talk to your insurance broker. I'm living in a single-family home. It has an unauthorized suite, or it has an authorized suite. Make sure those declarations are on your policy, because if you have a loss and the insurance company finds out that they didn't have all the correct information on their policy, guess what? They may disallow that loss or that coverage. So that's another thing that you really need to be clear about. Working with professionals who know all the T's to cross and the I's to dot, so that you get your insurance coverage, that you get everything dealt with before you remove your subjects and are committed to buying that property.
Absolutely. So I guess the other thing that comes up is if you go to the city and it's you're going to convert it from authorized or unauthorized to authorized, then do your taxes go up?
Depends on the municipality. That's a really good question. So in the city of Vancouver, or in all cities, if you've got an authorized suite, you're required to get a business license, which is inexpensive. I think it's like $35 or something like that per year, I should say. But your utility costs will probably go up. So you'll be paying for extra garbage collection, you'll be paying a little bit extra for water, and so forth. In some areas, your property taxes may go up, but it's more driven by the utility costs than it is the housing value. But again, you have to check with the different municipalities to see how they assess those things. BC Assessment is the one who assesses the value of a property. So they're going to take into account that it's got a secondary suite, and they're going to say they'll probably add a little value for that. So it will go up. But also, when you go to sell your property, it's easier for the banks to finance because it's an authorized suite. They're going to be more comfortable using the revenue from that. So your buyers are going to be capable or more comfortable paying a little bit more than they would maybe with an unauthorized suite. So that's something else to take into account.
So I guess the last kind of question that pops into my mind, and this is more a function of where we live, we're surrounded by, and we ourselves, it's a sandwich house.
Yeah.
There's 3 generations. One of our kids is living with us, and my parents are, was just the easiest way to look after them as they're in their 80s. And I know that we're surrounded by houses that is exactly the same, multiples. So how does that factor into this at all?
That is a question because, certainly the municipalities and the bylaws are more open to having multi-generational families, because you're right, that's very important. Particularly culturally, you'll have a lot of cultures, Asian cultures, well, you get 3 or 4 generations living in the same home. It's very common, and because of affordability, also, it's becoming local residents, people who grew up here like yourself and myself. We're starting to see the extended family living in. I've got young kids. I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm not sure how old they'll be when they move out. It might be another 20 years or 25, 30 years, who knows. So municipalities are open to that. What we are seeing is that they used to have more what they would call in-law suites and so forth. They seem to be doing away with that. Again, it depends on the specific municipality. But one of the big things is it's driven by the number of kitchens you have in a home. So they'll allow you to have one, with a secondary suite, if you have a kitchen in there and somebody's cooking in there, that's considered a secondary suite. If you have something that's, just got a door that's locked and it's got a bedroom and maybe a wet bar, that may not be considered a suite. So, that might be perfect for somebody who's got parents or older kids that come up and use the family kitchen. Also or nannies, right? That's another situation where somebody may eat with the family but have their own sort of separate locked off area. That typically wouldn't be considered a suite. It would be more just, separate living quarters, but it's not a suite. So the big thing that people look at, or the cities will look at, is, has extra square footage been added onto the house? And that's where they get quite cranky. If people are adding extra square footage onto a house, or taking a garage that's supposed to be required for parking and converting that into secondary accommodation or a second or third suite in a house, then municipalities tend to get a little cranky because you're using extra utilities, you've got safety aspects, there's on-street parking hassles that become problematic. So it's just layer after layer that you can peel back. So it's really important to be working with someone who can talk you through the concerns and the risks, and you may decide you want to take the risk of having an unauthorized suite, but you have to understand what that risk is. So getting properly informed, that's really the key to all of this.
That's great, Paul. I really appreciate this. This is important information that I think a lot of people kind of brush over and don't know what they're getting into until it's kind of almost too late. So we've been talking with Paul Toffoli. You can reach him at toffoli.ca or 604-787-6963. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Mark.